Hi, I'm Erin and I work on Classroom here at Bible Project. And this is one of our class sessions exploring the creation narrative in Genesis 1. In this session, we're going to study some key words in the opening line of the Bible. Understanding these words unlocks an important theological claim being made by the authors through their ancient understanding of the cosmos. Let's dive in.
Okay, let's take our next step forward. Let's actually turn to page 1 of Genesis, and we're going to do some samplings in light of our conversation so far. I brought this up in our very first session in Genesis 1, verse 1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And I talked about how this was very clear to me what this meant. This was the otherworldly post-mortem bliss and the globe when I first started reading the Bible. I now know that things are a little more complicated than that. So the question that should come to my mind is, well, I should recognize what's happening in my brain when I hear the word earth in my language. And then the next question should be, what did the biblical author mean to communicate by the word that was used in Hebrew? So let's go with that question. I have here in the notes, oh yeah, this is great just for good trivia. On the left is the first picture taken of Earth from outer space. On the right is the famous Earthrise picture taken from the moon landing in 1968. So this is just to register the fact, when I am sitting here thinking of the globe when I read the first sentence of the Bible, the concept of the world as a sphere actually predates these photographs by like many centuries. There were actually they were seen as crazy, most of them, but a bunch of ancient Greek mathematicians who were onto this like around the time of Jesus. Just nobody listened to them for a long time. But in the popular imagination, this sank in a new way, especially in the last 100 years. So I hope that we have made a persuasive case that somebody should take seriously the fact that maybe this is not what the biblical author has in mind, right? You don't have to be convinced, but I think if you're not convinced, you should think very seriously about why. So the question should be, what does the biblical author mean when they use the word erets? You see it right here, erets. Let me show you a couple other uses. This is how you do it. Find what's called a concordance that can allow you to search for other biblical passages that use the same word. And the more examples you look at, the better, because it will help you build out a profile of what this word in Hebrew means. So let me show you just 2 examples, and you can start to put it together. Psalm 102, verse 19. God looked down from his holy height. From heaven, the Lord gazed upon the erets. Heavens above, and the erets below. Psalm 103. For as high as the heavens are above the erets, so great is his loving kindness towards those who fear him. There's nothing controversial here. You're just looking at, so erets is, it's down here. Heavens above, earth is down here. So the use of this word is spoken from the vantage point of somebody on the land, looking up. So, Shemayim, heavens, is what's up there. Erets is what's under my feet. That's what the word means. It's the land down here. Mm-hmm. We could look at hundreds of more, but you get the idea. So if I come back to Genesis 1, in the beginning, God created what's up there and what's down here. Or I think that a couple of at least English words, because it's my first language, that can somehow neutralize the issue is the word skies and land. They feel neutral, and they don't carry the freight of the heaven, the post-mortem bliss, and the earth as a globe, but just skies and land. Shall we do another example in Genesis 1? let's talk about that thing on day 2. What is it that happens on day 2? And God said, let there be a raqia in the midst of the waters. So let's say you don't know what the word raqia is. Let's do an intellectual experiment right now. Right? Let's say, what is the raqia? Yeah, so we build a little image of it as we watch it come, right? So starting in verse 6, what is assumed that is already there?
Water.
Water. Okay, all right. So we've got waters. So there's waters. Let there be a raqia in the middle of the waters so that it separates waters from waters. So we're imagining that the neutral default state is just water. You brought this up earlier, Joy. So we're going to begin to build our profile of the waters. And then this undifferentiated waters all of a sudden get split so that I get waters above and waters below, and that thing separating them is called, in Hebrew, the raqia. So God made the raqia. Who's responsible for separating out disorder to create a realm where order can be and thrive? Who does that? God made the raqia. Separating the waters which are below the raqia from the waters now above the raqia. And God called the raqia heavens. Evening, morning, day 1. So raqia can be called heavens, but what's raqia all about? Here's something we learn later in verse 20, that the birds fly against the face of the raqia. So when you look up at it, it's like they're against its surface, which it makes sense. If erets means down here, right, you can kind of put it together. So we've got our little birds flying up here. And if you're down there, you're looking up, they're on the raqia. Let's look at, okay, so here's, you could do that with a concordance, like an online concordance. To do this next step, you would need to learn how to use a Greek or Hebrew dictionary that could get you to the next step. And what you could learn is, if you look up this noun, raqia, is that it has a related, Hebrew, this is cool, this is not unique to Hebrew, but Hebrew works this principle in a way that most languages only do a little bit. But Hebrew words are almost all built off of a 3-letter root. Just like in English, I can say, I ran to the store, I run to the store, she runs to the store. There's a R and there's the N. And you can change the middle letter, you can change a letter at the end, but the R and the N is like a root. So in Hebrew, there's always a 3-letter root. And you can make a noun of taking that root and changing the vowels. You can put a letter on the end, a letter on the beginning of the root. You can take the root and make a verb out of it, and so on. So the raqia is a noun that comes from the root raqah. Raqah is a verb. So let's look at what happens when you raqah something. This is in Exodus 39. You know, the craftsmen working on the tabernacle, they raqad, smooth sheets of gold, and then cut them into tiny cords that they could weave together with blue and scarlet and purple and make these beautiful cords that tie the different parts of the priestly robes together. So if you're hammering or smoothing out gold into a sheet and then cutting it, this is called gold leaf. It's super thinly pressed gold that becomes like a sheet of paper, and then you can cut it and then twist it and do stuff with it. But does gold come like that? No. Right. So you have to raqah it. Numbers 16, verse 39. Eleazar took the priest took the bronze censers, which the men who were burned had offered. So they take these bronze incense stands, and they raqa'd them into plating for the altar. So do you get the image here? Yeah. So if that's what raqa means, what does it mean to say that the thing up there is the raqia, the thing that has been raqa'd? And you get it. It's very intuitive, isn't it?
I don't understand.
Okay.
So what is it doing given the fact that it's this thin thing around us or around?
So if we go back to Genesis, let there be a raqia. There are waters up there. Yeah. If there are waters up there, what do I know about water? Well, it falls down. Yes. So there must be something keeping all that water up there from falling down. It must be solid. Yeah. So what is it? Well, it's the raqia. Right? It's the solid thing that God made that he sustains to keep all those waters. Yes, that's right. Because there was only one occasion where God allowed all of those waters above to crash back in. And you know that story? Yeah. It's in Genesis 7, verse 11. You'll see it right here. In the 600th year of Noah's life, in the 2nd month, on the 17th day of the month, on that day, the fountains of the great deep burst open. We'll talk about those in a second. And the windows of the skies were opened. So what God has separated in Genesis 1 is now collapsing back in on itself in the flood. That's the image. So it's about the decreation. The flood is a decreation.
So are you trying to say then that the raqia protects or keeps together the earth within it?
Yeah, it's a protective shield that creates a space where life can flourish. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Does that mean, another clarification, does that mean that there are always sort of forces that have existed that are not necessarily there to help humans and God's creation flourish, but rather there to destroy it?
Also, pause. Okay. We'll come to it. But whatever these waters are, they are the obstacle that must be dealt with so that God's purposes can go forward. They are an obstacle in Genesis 1. They will take on the nature of a threat as you go on through the biblical story. But yes, we will come back to these things. After the flood, what does God say he'll never let happen again?
The merging of the waters.
Yeah, after Noah gets off the boat and offers his sacrifice, in Genesis 8, verse 21, God says, "Never again will I destroy all life in the way that I just have done." So, in other words, the conception is that there are the waters above, up there. They're not the source of rainwater. I actually used to think this for a long time, even until quite recently, until this hit me like a ton of bricks. Because there's lots of biblical verses about clouds being the source of rain. So the waters above the raqia are still there, and they're held back by God, and they were allowed to drop on one occasion, which God said, "I'm not ever going to do that again." Because God's purpose is that humans rule heaven and earth as one. And if he destroys them all, that's not going to work very well. But so the waters above dropped one time and then not again.
Can I ask a question on that?
Please.
Because
Yep.
I did grow up with kind of this understanding that was like the firmament, and the firmament then like fell with the flood, but that it didn't get like replaced almost.
Right.
So
yes, that's right.
Kind of.
Correct.
I guess, where do you get the interpretation that it kind of like was?
But it's still there.
Yeah, that it's still there.
Yeah. In Psalm 104, those waters are still there. Remember, he lays the beams of his upper chambers on the waters. the waters above are viewed as the foundation of God's heavenly throne room above the raqia. So they're still up there, held at bay by God's mighty word, so to speak. What you're referring to is there was a pretty popularized view of the flood in America, kind of mid-20th century, that explained the raqia as like a water canopy that on some models of a young Earth interpretation, that the Earth is 6,000 years old, that's what incubated the Earth for a certain phase. And it was a way of accounting for what seemed like an ancient primitive idea of the waters above and trying to create a scientific model that could explain that. But the problem is that in the minds of the biblical authors, they're still there. They've always been there, and the flood didn't deplete the waters. They're still up there, being held at bay. And this is just one example, and we'll look at others. That's a good question. Yeah.
So farther along in Psalm 104, specifically in terms of not allowing the waters that are above the raqia to come down, it says in verse 13, from your lofty abode you water the mountains. And so I guess part of my question is, I guess help me see the distinction between the waters that are, I guess the clouds is what you talked about, and then the ones that are above.
That's right.
The raqia.
Actually, there are. This is really wonderful. Yes, I made what sounded like a very definitive statement. What I didn't say is, but there are just a few places, and this is one of them, where the waters are coming from the upper chambers, as if it seems like from above the raqia. And there's a way that's intuitive. I mean, it's blue, right? At least when the sun is out, they're blue. And then there are many more passages that talk about rain coming from the clouds. And so I think where we're at is the way that all of our cosmological language is fuzzy. Mostly rain comes from clouds. Sometimes it's identified with the raqia itself. And then you just have to ask, well, within this cosmology, if I'm looking up from the dry land, if there's no clouds, there's usually not any water coming down. But when there are clouds, well, where does their water come from? But they must be fed in some way from something even above them. But aren't you glad that it's somebody who has their hand on the faucet versus the windows just opening up? Yeah, thank you for that. That's good. But you're seeing an important theological claim being made through this cosmology picture, aren't you? The world is a place where life can flourish, but it's a dangerous place. And the only thing keeping this whole thing from collapsing in on itself is something beyond it, so someone beyond it.
Question?
Yes.
What does cosmology mean?
Yes, thank you. Bless you. You're not the only one. I'm so sorry, I just charge ahead using these terms. Okay, yeah, so cosmos, here, we'll just, because this actually is kind of fun to do, and you'll learn some Greek in the process. So cosmos comes from the Greek word kosmeo, which is actually the Greek root underneath our English word cosmetics. Kosmeo means to bring order. To bring order. Amen. So the cosmos is, it's a noun referring to the universe, but referring it to as an ordered reality, the ordered reality. And then cosmology, that logi, comes from the Greek word logos, which means word or account. So cosmology is giving an account of the ordered world. It's either narratives or imagery that we employ to describe the cosmos. Cosmology. Sometimes the word is used specifically to describe the origin of the cosmos. So a cosmology would be, what's your account of the origins of the cosmos? But it can also refer to just how you envision it, how it's structured.
So kind of going back to the knowledge versus meaning, like cosmology is the knowledge piece. Is there like an equivalent of the meaning side?
Oh, yes. Yep. This might be too nerdy, but it's a way that physics is a discipline in the sciences that tries to understand the material structure of reality and how it's ordered and how, so this is from atoms to molecules to all this. There is an ancient companion to physics called metaphysics. Metaphysics is a way of saying, beyond what's observable, how do we give an account for the meaning of all of this physical phenomenon? And this is a distinction that's been helpful for me. What most of the debates about Genesis 1 are about what it implies about the physics of the universe. And I would just go back to my question of, are we doing something similar to turning to a cookbook to learn how to grow food? It's like, well, I guess you could infer from a cookbook how to get some carrots, but maybe they come out of the ground and so I should plant some. But is that what the cookbook is designed to tell you? No, it's designed to tell you some other information. In a similar way, I think Genesis 1 is using an ancient physics to give a metaphysical account of the meaning of the universe. And what's happened in our modern era is because of a whole bunch of things that would take another class and another scholar, is how our culture has completely separated and quarantined metaphysics from any conversation of the sciences. So you can just talk about physical phenomenon as if this is all just self-explaining, and as if it's all here for no apparent reason, and why should you think that you would even need to talk about a reason for any of this? You must be religious. And we don't do religion in here, we're the sciences, and so there you go. So I don't know if that kind of helps, but that's at least some categories that have helped me.